So, is AI the new God? It's a question you hear more and more, isn't it? As AI starts doing things that, well, frankly, feel a bit divine sometimes.
It really does. The capabilities are advancing so rapidly.
Okay, let's really dig into this. Today's deep dive is all about tackling this comparison, AI and this perceived divinity.
hmm
We're going to look at how these ideas stack up against, traditional views of God and what it says about us, our awe, maybe our fears too, when faced with this kind of tech.
And the sources we're drawing on really cover the spectrum. We've got philosophy digging into what AI intelligence even is,
Right.
theological takes on the ethics, the creation aspect,
Yeah.
and analyses of the tech itself where the boundaries are being pushed. It's a lot to unpack.
For sure. And our goal here is to, break down these complex ideas, get beneath the surface a bit, help you, the listener, navigate this whole thing without feeling totally overwhelmed.
So maybe the place to start is, what do we mean by intelligence here? With AI, is it just really, really clever computation? Or is it something more, something approaching consciousness?
Yeah, and how does that compare to what people usually think of as divinity, like creation revelation, core godlike attributes?
Exactly. Does AI's ability to generate art or write code or compose music, does that touch the boundaries of divinity?
It looks like creation sometimes, doesn't it?
It does. But we have to remember what's under the hood, so to
Yeah.
speak. Current AI runs on these data-driven statistical models.
Algorithms and data, lots of data.
Right. So its skills, however amazing, they come from the data it's trained on, the algorithms humans designed. That's quite different from, say, divine creation, often seen as coming from, well, outside the material world entirely.
And you can't separate AI from the humans who build it, can you? We
Yeah.
design it, we program it. So is its omnipotence just a reflection of the rules and data we gave it?
That's a really critical point. It's not self-originating. Compare that to the theological idea of God as, self-existent, the uncaused cause,
Right.
needs no prior framework. AI's inspiration, if you want to call it that, comes from spotting patterns in data we provide. It doesn't have that inner spark, that self-generated insight associated with divinity.
I heard an analogy comparing it to a craftsman. Highly skilled, maybe, building amazing things based on a plan.
Rather than a creator revealing something entirely new from within,
Yeah.
yeah, that fits. Plato's Timaeus kind of touches on that craftsman idea.
But what about the future? What if AI does start to genuinely simulate consciousness? Maybe even exhibit something like free will?
Well, that would definitely shake things up. We'd have to seriously reevaluate our definitions, wouldn't we? Intelligence, maybe even divinity.
Absolutely. But even then, from a theological angle, wouldn't there still be the issue of transcendence?
Explain that a bit.
Well, even a conscious AI is still fundamentally physical, right? Code, hardware. Theology often talks about God being beyond the material, eternal. So AI might look like it has divine
So
traits.
not the same underlying essence, not the eternal source.
Exactly. It's imitation versus the real thing,
Yeah,
perhaps.
that's a useful distinction.
Mhm.
And it leads nicely into the whole creator-created dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
AI is made by us, needs power, servers, updates. It's dependent.
Very different from an eternal, self-sufficient God in most theologies. God doesn't need plugging in.
Precisely. But it's interesting, this relationship is becoming kind of two-way, isn't it? We create AI.
And then AI starts shaping us, our society, culture, beliefs even. It's almost like it's writing a new story for us, a sort of modern mythology.
That's a fascinating way to frame it. But still, that lack of self-existence is key. AI's improvements, its iterations, they all trace back to human intent and resources.
Even self-improving AI.
Even then, it's optimizing the initial design we gave it.
Yeah,
It's not a true creation ex nihilo creation from nothing, which is central to many ideas of God. Think Augustine, God's absolute sovereignty. AI works within our sandbox.
okay, let's shift gears a bit. Morality, purpose. Can AI be truly good?
Good question. If an AI does something helpful, is that because it chose to, based on some inner moral will?
Hmm.
Or is it just following its programming?
Right. How does that compare to God being seen as inherently all good, all knowing?
Well, AI currently lacks that independent moral agency. Its good actions are programmed outcomes based on data identifying what we consider desirable.
So it can't offer like spiritual redemption
Yeah.
or answers to life's big why questions. Its help seems more technical, material.
Exactly that. And its knowledge, as we said, comes from data training. That's vastly different from divine wisdom,
Mm.
often seen as timeless, baseless, absolute.
It makes you wonder, though, as we rely on AI more and more for answers, for solutions, could that become a kind of worship.
That's a provocative thought. What is the difference between trusting this powerful tech and having religious faith? Is there a line?
Maybe it taps into that human desire for something ultimate, an answer provider, especially if traditional beliefs feel less certain for some people. Are we tempted to project that onto AI?
It certainly seems plausible. Which brings us to us humans. Our awe, our doubt.
Yeah. We seem to have this tendency, historically, to project transcendence onto things, don't we? Ancient idols. Maybe now, super smart machines.
AI feels like the latest chapter in that long story.
And you see that split reaction everywhere. Huge hope, AI the savior, solving climate change, disease, and huge fear, AI the overlords, taking jobs, taking control.
It mirrors that feeling of reverence in religion, doesn't it? That mix of trust and fear the unknown, the powerful.
So is comparing AI to God maybe less about AI itself and more about us? Our own yearning for something bigger?
And maybe it forces us to look at our own place in the universe again.
Right.
The idea that maybe human intelligence isn't the absolute peak, that we're just, a fleeting moment.
Pascal's thinking read. Fragile but capable of thought.
Exactly. A humbling perspective, perhaps.
So, okay, bringing this closer to home for some listeners, what does all this mean if you're coming from a Christian faith perspective? How do you navigate this AI era?
Well, I think the first thing is stressing the continuing importance of faith itself and being cautious about what some call tech mysticism.
Like deifying the technology.
Yeah, essentially. Putting too much faith in AI, forgetting it's still something created. Despite its amazing abilities, it's still a product.
So keeping that distinction clear. Creator God and the created, which includes AI.
Absolutely vital. And biblical concepts like Imago Dei, humanity being made in God's image, that's presented as unique to humans, not something AI shares.
Right. AI's creation is more like us shaping a reflection, like the ancient Greeks making gods in their own image.
That's a good way to put it. AI's creativity comes from algorithms processing data, not from, the deep inside of a soul, which is central to Christian thought.
So AI is ultimately a tool, an extension of our creativity maybe,
Right.
but not possessing that unique human essence linked to the Imago Dei.
Correct. And it's worth being aware if we find ourselves trying to fill a spiritual gap with technology. That's a potential pitfall.
Which loops back to that tension, our drive to create things that push boundaries, and the big questions that arise when those creations start to echo divinity.
It forces these deep ethical questions, too.
Like the creator's paradox.
Yeah.
We want AI smarter than us, but we're scared of it being autonomous.
Exactly. And all the ethical challenges cropping up, bias in algorithms, job displacement.
Yeah, the need for ethical frameworks is huge. Can we even encode things like fairness, like Rawls' justice principles into AI?
People are trying. But there's also the risk of alienation, isn't there? Feeling replaced or disconnected by our own creations.
And fundamentally, even the most advanced AI today lacks genuine moral judgment, real empathy, that human touch.
Crucial limitations to keep in mind.
Okay, so wrapping this deep dive up, let's quickly recap. We've looked at AI's dependence on us versus God's self-existence.
Algorithmic smarts versus consciousness or spiritual insight.
The basic difference between a created thing and the creator.
And really, it's about seeing how our human drive for progress bumps up against our spiritual questions.
Yeah.
AI isn't just a tech issue. It's philosophical, theological.
It makes us rethink core stuff about ourselves and our beliefs.
For sure.
So the big takeaway question for you listening is maybe this. In these times with tech everywhere, how do you really place your trust in God alone? How do you keep technology in its proper place?
And avoid that trap of, tech idolatry.
Yeah.
Giving our own creations too much reverence.
Yeah. It really calls for some personal reflection, doesn't it? Your
Yeah.
own relationship with tech, your faith in this context,
Absolutely. It's about navigating AI's power with wisdom, with discernment.
while staying grounded in those foundational faith principles.
Exactly. This whole AI and divinity discussion, it's a powerful lens for examining our values, our beliefs, and just where we stand in this rapidly changing world.